My sister turned a family roast into a public humiliation, but I fought back with one line that left the whole room in silence. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I recently found myself in a situation that felt like a trap from the start. It all began when my sister Lily, 28, announced in our family group chat that she was organizing a family roast at our upcoming reunion. At first, I thought I'd misread the message. A roast for our family? This wasn't something we'd ever done before, and the way she phrased it made it clear who the main target would be: me. Everyone seemed excited right away. My parents sent thumbs-up emojis, my cousins started joking about what they'd wear, and the group chat lit up like it was Christmas morning. But I couldn't shake this bad feeling. I know my sister Lily. She has a habit of taking things too far, hiding her insults behind a mask of humor. For years, she's made me the punchline of her jokes, and every time I tried to speak up, the response was always the same. Oh, come on, she's just being playful. But it never felt playful on my end, so I brought it up with my parents. I called them that same night, saying I wasn't sure this roast was a good idea. I told them it sounded more like an excuse for Lily to drag me through the mud again. But they just laughed it off. My dad even said, "You need to learn to take a joke, son. It's all in good fun." I tried to push back, but they wouldn't hear it. My mom said it would be a good bonding experience for the family. Bonding? Sure, if that means bonding over humiliating me. The next few days were tense. Lily kept hyping up the event in the family group chat, dropping hints about her special material. She was having way too much fun with this, and the more she talked about it, the more I felt like a cornered animal. Even my parents got in on it, making jokes like, "I hope you're ready, OP. Lily's been preparing for weeks." It was clear they were all in on this, and I started feeling like I was alone in a crowd of people who couldn't see the problem. Thankfully, my girlfriend, Sophie, 25, noticed something was off. I hadn't even told her about the roast yet, but she could tell I was anxious. When I finally explained everything, she was as concerned as I was. Sophie knows the history here, how Lily's jokes have always had an edge to them, how she'd use family gatherings as her own personal comedy club at my expense. Sophie said it straight. You don't have to go if you're uncomfortable. Set your boundaries. I knew she was right, but the thought of backing out made me feel like a coward. I didn't want to give Lily and the rest of the family another reason to call me oversensitive. It's been this way for as long as I can remember. Growing up, it was always me versus Lily, the perfect golden child. She was funny, outgoing, and had this sharp wit that everyone adored. I was the quieter one, more reserved, and that made me an easy target. She'd say something embarrassing about me, and instead of stepping in, my parents would laugh along. They treated it like sibling rivalry, but it never felt like a fair fight. The roast just seemed like the next level of this long-standing dynamic. Despite Sophie's advice, I decided to at least try setting some boundaries. I sent Lily a private message, asking her to keep the jokes light. Her response? "Oh my God, you're being so sensitive. Relax, it's going to be hilarious." She promised to tone it down, but I knew better. Her tone made it clear she wasn't taking me seriously at all. Then the rules of the roast got posted in the group chat. It was a long list, but the one part that stood out to me was this: everyone's fair game, but we have a special guest of honor, OP. The whole thing read like a setup. I couldn't believe it. I tried once more to back out, saying maybe it wasn't the best idea for me to participate, but the backlash was immediate. My mom called me, sounding genuinely annoyed. "You're not backing out now. We've all been looking forward to this, and you're going to ruin it for everyone if you don't show up." The guilt trip worked, and I reluctantly agreed to go. As if things couldn't get worse, I found out Lily had invited some unexpected guests, extended family members I hadn't seen in years, and a couple of old high school friends, people who knew me back when I was an awkward teenager. The idea of them sitting there, watching me get roasted in front of everyone, made me feel sick. Then came the final straw. My cousin Rachel, 27, gave me a heads up. Lily had been gathering stories about me for weeks. She had been messaging family members, asking for any embarrassing dirt they could remember, and putting together a script. It felt like a hit job disguised as a joke. I confronted my parents again, telling them this wasn't right, that it felt like an attack. They dismissed me again, saying I was being dramatic and needed to lighten up. With no other choice, I decided I'd go to the reunion but made a backup plan to leave if things got ugly. I told Sophie I was giving my family one last chance to prove me wrong. But the night before the event, Lily sent a message that hit me like a gut punch. "Can't wait for tomorrow." Finally going to say what everyone's been thinking. At that point, any hope I had left was gone. I knew I was walking into a trap. The day of the reunion came, and I went in feeling tense, but determined. Sophie was by my side, trying to keep things light. The place was packed, a big rented hall filled with familiar faces. Everyone was in a great mood, and it felt like a real celebration at first. There was music playing, tables set up with food, and my parents were busy making small talk with relatives we hadn't seen in years. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Lily was in her element, moving from group to group, clearly the star of the show. She was laughing loudly, greeting everyone with hugs and jokes. It seemed like the whole room was revolving around her. I spotted a few high school friends she'd invited without telling me, and it hit me again how much effort she'd put into this. I tried to stay calm and told myself maybe I was overthinking it. Sophie squeezed my hand and gave me an encouraging nod. When it was time for the roast, everyone gathered around. My dad called for silence, and Lily stepped up with a big grin on her face, holding a microphone. She started off with some light jokes about our parents, poking fun at their quirks. Everyone laughed, and I felt myself relax a little. It wasn't so bad. She moved on to our younger cousins, making silly jokes about their social media habits. Even I chuckled at a few of those. For a moment, I thought I might have misjudged this whole thing. Then she turned to me. It started small. She shared a childhood story about me getting lost at a theme park because I was too scared to ask for help. People laughed, and I tried to smile along, but I noticed her eyes flicking towards me, watching my reaction. She kept going, bringing up more and more personal stories. There was one about me tripping in front of my entire class during a school play, another about a girl rejecting me at a dance. The laughter was getting louder, but I felt the room closing in. These weren't the light-hearted jokes she'd made about everyone else. These were targeted, humiliating moments that I hadn't thought about in years. Sophie shifted uncomfortably beside me, clearly sensing where this was headed. I caught my mom's eye, hoping she'd step in and say something, but she was laughing too, making a comment about how I'd always been sensitive. It was like they couldn't see the difference between the harmless jokes and the mean-spirited jabs. Then Lily pulled out her big punchline, a story about my failed startup. This wasn't just any joke. This was about something I'd told her in confidence during a rough time, when I'd lost a lot of money and felt like a complete failure. She twisted it into a joke about how I'd tried to be the next big entrepreneur and ended up back at square one, living paycheck to paycheck. The room erupted in laughter, louder than ever before. I could see the smirks, the knowing looks exchanged by people who had no idea what it had really been like for me. I tried to laugh it off, but I felt my throat tighten. My voice cracked when I tried to make a joke back, and the laughter around me slowly died down. I stood up and said I needed a break. The room fell silent as I walked out, Sophie following right behind me. The shift in atmosphere was palpable. It was like the fun had been sucked out of the room the moment I left. Outside, I pulled Lily aside. I told her she'd gone too far, that this wasn't what we'd agreed on. She rolled her eyes and smirked, accusing me of being a sore loser and overreacting. "It's just jokes, OP. You need to learn to take it," she said, brushing past me like it was nothing. By the time I got back to the main hall, it felt like everyone had made up their minds. My dad looked disappointed, shaking his head at me. My mom said I was ruining the fun, and a few of my uncles joined in, telling me to stop being dramatic. The gaslighting was in full swing. It was like I was the only one who saw what had really happened. I decided I'd had enough. I took Sophie's hand, and we left. I didn't even look back when I heard my mom calling after me, telling me to come back and stop being so dramatic. We got in the car, and Sophie didn't say anything for a while. She just drove, letting me process everything. My phone started buzzing with messages almost immediately, texts from family members accusing me of being a poor sport, of ruining the night for everyone. When we got home, I vented to a few friends who couldn't believe what had happened. They were just as shocked as I was that my family had taken things this far. It was a relief to have someone validate what I'd experienced because I was starting to feel like I'd imagined it all. Then Sophie showed me something that made my stomach drop. Lily had posted a recap of the roast on her social media. It included a clip of me walking out, captioned with a mocking comment, "Guess who couldn't handle a few jokes?" The post was gaining traction, with friends and family laughing along in the comments. It was like she was determined to squeeze every last drop of attention from this. That was the moment I realized I was done. I wasn't going to be the family's punching bag anymore. I started drafting a message to the family group chat, ready to call out their toxic behavior once and for all. The morning after the roast, I woke up feeling drained. My phone was buzzing nonstop with notifications. The family group chat was filled with chatter, everyone recapping the night. It was like they'd all had the time of their lives. I decided it was time to speak up, so I drafted a message. I kept it straightforward, explaining that the roast went way beyond harmless jokes. I pointed out specific moments, like the story about my failed business and the embarrassing anecdotes from high school, highlighting how they felt more like targeted attacks than jokes. I hit send, and within seconds, the responses started rolling in. Lily was the first. She posted a laughing emoji, followed by a passive-aggressive reply about how I needed to learn to take a joke. It was exactly what I expected. My mom chimed in next, saying I was being dramatic and ruining the fun for everyone. The whole chat quickly turned into a pile-on, with aunts, uncles, and even cousins jumping in, telling me I was making a big deal out of nothing. They brought up old incidents, saying I'd always played the victim whenever Lily made a joke. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality for a second. It was pure gaslighting, everyone acting like I was overreacting, as if I hadn't just been humiliated in front of family and friends. Then, out of nowhere, I got a private message from my cousin, Rachel. She said she felt uncomfortable during the roast and thought Lily's jokes were mean-spirited. It wasn't much, but it was the first time anyone acknowledged what really happened. At least I wasn't completely alone. I took a break from the group chat, but it wasn't over. Sophie came over and showed me Lily's social media. She'd posted from the roast, including the moment where I walked out. The video had a caption that read, "Guess who couldn't handle a little family fun?" It was already getting likes and comments. Mutual friends, some I hadn't seen in years, were joining in, laughing along like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. I could see Sophie's face turn red with anger. Without hesitating, Sophie jumped into the comment section and called Lily out. She wrote that this wasn't a joke, it was bullying, and everyone laughing was encouraging toxic behavior. It didn't take long for the replies to flood in. Lily played the victim immediately, claiming Sophie was overreacting and that she was just protecting her fragile boyfriend. The comments turned into a heated argument, with people picking sides. I just watched it unfold, feeling like I was stuck in the middle of a public circus. While this was happening, my mom started making calls to our relatives. By the end of the day, I had a bunch of messages from aunts and uncles scolding me for causing drama and for letting outsiders, meaning Sophie, get involved in family matters. The narrative was already spinning out of control. My mom was telling everyone that I was overreacting and that Sophie was a bad influence on me, that she was the one making me so sensitive. It was surreal, watching the smear campaign against me and Sophie ramp up so quickly. After a long talk with Sophie, I realized I was at a breaking point. I tried to handle this calmly, but it was clear that no one in my family wanted to hear me out. I drafted a detailed message for the family chat. I laid everything out, how the roast wasn't about fun but about making me the butt of every joke, and how I was done putting up with the toxic behavior. I told them I was going no contact with anyone who continued to support what Lily did. I sent the message and waited. It didn't take long for the screenshots to start circulating. A cousin shared my message on social media, and suddenly it was out there for everyone to see. The reactions were mixed. Some people expressed sympathy, saying they understood why I was upset. Others mocked me, calling me oversensitive and saying I needed to grow up. Lily, of course, couldn't resist responding. She posted a vague, cryptic message about family members who can't take a joke, tagging me indirectly. The comments from our mutual friends poured in, further humiliating me. Later that night, my dad reached out. He hadn't said a word during the initial fallout, but now he was messaging me privately. He admitted he'd known for a while that Lily's behavior was hurtful. He said he felt pressured by my mom to ignore it and go along with the jokes. It was the first time I'd ever heard him acknowledge it, but it felt hollow. It didn't change anything now that the damage was done. Then I got a text from Lily. It was a half-hearted apology. She claimed she didn't realize I'd be so sensitive and ended it with a sarcastic, "I'll try not to be so funny next time." I didn't even have to think about my response. I told her I didn't accept her apology because it wasn't sincere. I informed her I was going no contact indefinitely and blocked her number. The decision to cut ties sent shockwaves through the family. My dad and cousin Rachel quietly expressed support, but most of the family was outraged. The group chat turned into a battlefield of opinions. I left the chat and blocked anyone who tried to pull me back into the drama. For the first time in ages, I felt a sense of relief. I realized how much emotional energy I'd wasted trying to fit into a family that never respected me. Sophie and I decided to plan a weekend getaway, just the two of us, to clear our heads and start focusing on our own lives. It was time to move forward without the constant weight of my family's toxicity dragging me down. After going no contact with most of my family, things started to settle down, and for a few days, I felt like I could breathe again. Sophie and I even planned a weekend away to escape the noise. But before we could get out the door, there was an unexpected knock. My mother stood outside our apartment, looking frustrated and impatient. I hadn't seen her in person since the roast, and the last thing I expected was for her to show up unannounced. She wasted no time, launching into a tirade about how I was tearing the family apart. According to her, everyone was upset, and it was all my fault. She insisted I reconcile with Lily, saying I needed to make things right. I stayed calm, even as her voice got louder. I told her flat out that I wasn't going to discuss Lily anymore. I'd set my boundaries, and I wasn't budging. The look on her face was pure shock. She tried to push her way inside, but I held firm, telling her she needed to leave. She stormed off, muttering under her breath about how I was making a huge mistake. After she left, Sophie sat down with me, reassuring me that standing my ground was the right call. We talked for hours about how toxic family dynamics can be, how my mental health had improved since cutting off contact. It was the first real conversation we'd had in days that wasn't overshadowed by the drama. I felt lighter, like maybe I was finally taking back control of my life. But the peace didn't last long. I got a message from an old high school friend who had recently run into Lily at a party. Apparently, she had been telling anyone who would listen that I was unstable and that Sophie was manipulating me. It was the same smear campaign my mother had started, now being spread by Lily to anyone who would listen. My friend said people were starting to believe her, and it was becoming a topic of gossip in our old social circles. Sophie was furious when I told her. She suggested we send a cease and desist letter to Lily to stop her from spreading lies. It felt extreme, but after everything, I agreed it might be the only way to make her stop. I consulted a lawyer, who confirmed we had enough grounds to take legal action if she continued. The letter was drafted and ready to go, a final warning to end this before it escalated even further. Just as we were about to send it, my dad reached out, asking for a family meeting. He wanted everyone to sit down and resolve this like adults. I was hesitant. The idea of sitting in a room with Lily again, facing all that hostility, didn't sound appealing. But part of me still hoped this could be a chance to finally speak my truth. I agreed, but only on the condition that Sophie could come with me. We gathered at my parents' house. The atmosphere was tense from the start. My dad opened the meeting, trying to keep things light, but it was clear no one was in the mood. I started by calmly explaining my side, how the roast wasn't about fun but about making me the target of every joke. I barely got 2 sentences in before Lily interrupted, making snide comments and rolling her eyes. It was like she couldn't help herself, deflecting blame and acting like this was all some big misunderstanding. The argument heated up quickly. I called her out directly, accusing her of bullying and emotional abuse. That's when Lily snapped. She yelled, admitting she'd always been jealous of me, of my independence, of the fact that I wasn't afraid to step away from the family's toxic behavior. She ranted about how she resented no longer having me as the family's scapegoat. The room went silent. Even my dad looked stunned. I glanced at my mom, expecting her to say something, to finally stand up for me, but she just sat there, visibly uncomfortable, her eyes darting between us. In that moment, I realized her loyalty to Lily was stronger than her desire to protect me. It was like a final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I stood up, telling them I was done trying to fix things, done attending family events, done with the toxic cycle. I walked out of the house without looking back, Sophie right beside me. The sense of finality was overwhelming but also liberating. On the drive home, Sophie suggested we move to a new city for a fresh start. It was something we'd talked about before, but I'd always hesitated. Now it felt like the right move. I agreed, and we started making plans right then and there. A change of scenery sounded like exactly what we needed. The next day, I received unexpected messages of support from a few extended family members who had been at the meeting. They apologized for not speaking up sooner, saying they'd seen the favoritism towards Lily for years, but had been too afraid to say anything. It was a small comfort, but it felt like a bit of validation after everything. We sent the cease and desist letter to Lily, making it clear that any more would lead to legal consequences. Within hours, she posted a long, emotional rant on social media, accusing me of betraying the family and calling me ungrateful. It was filled with manipulative language, but this time, the comments were different. People started calling her out, pointing out how toxic she was being. It seemed like the tide was finally turning. A few weeks later, Sophie and I found a new place in a different city. We packed up our things and left without telling anyone except for a few close friends. As we drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. It was time to start fresh, far away from the drama, and focus on building a future that wasn't tied down by my family's toxicity. The cease and desist letter was sent, and I hoped it would be the end of it. Instead, it backfired spectacularly. Lily took a photo of the letter and posted it on her social media with a long, dramatic caption. She framed it as proof of my mental instability, claiming I was paranoid and trying to silence her. The post quickly gained attention, with dozens of mutual friends commenting, asking if I was okay, or implying that I'd gone off the deep end. It was like she was deliberately trying to paint me as the villain. The backlash from my family came almost immediately. My parents called, and before I could even say hello, they were yelling, accusing me of escalating the situation unnecessarily. They didn't care about the months of harassment or the fact that Lily had crossed every boundary. All they saw was me making a scene by taking legal action. I tried to explain that this was a last resort, but they refused to listen, siding with Lily yet again. It was clear they weren't going to change. That's when I made the final decision to go completely no contact with my parents and Lily. I blocked them on every platform, cutting off any way for them to reach me. It felt like closing a door on a part of my life that had been draining me for years. Sophie supported my choice, reminding me that it was the healthiest option for both of us. But Lily wasn't done. She continued her smear campaign, posting edited screenshots and cherry-picked messages to paint herself as the victim and me as the aggressor. Her posts were getting traction, and she seemed to thrive on the attention. Every comment, every share like fuel for her, even as it deepened the family rift. Amid all the chaos, an unexpected message came through from my estranged aunt, my mother's sister, who I hadn't spoken to in years. She reached out privately, saying she'd seen Lily's posts and was disgusted by what was happening. She shared her own experiences, revealing she had also been on the receiving end of the family's toxic dynamics. She offered her support, validating my decision to cut ties. It was surprising but oddly comforting to know I wasn't the only one who had suffered under the same roof. After talking it over with Sophie and my lawyer, I realized we needed to take it a step further. The harassment wasn't stopping, and it was affecting my peace of mind. My lawyer advised me to file for a restraining order against Lily. It was a difficult choice, but it felt like the only way to protect myself and set firm boundaries. Just as we were preparing the paperwork, I got a message from a mutual friend who worked with Lily. Apparently, she'd had a public meltdown at her office, ranting about the family drama in front of her co-workers. People were starting to notice her erratic behavior, and it was affecting her reputation. For the first time, it felt like her actions were catching up with her. I didn't feel joy, but there was a sense of justice in knowing that she couldn't hide behind her social media persona forever. Then came an email from my mother. It was long, filled with emotional pleas for me to reconcile with Lily. She blamed me for tearing the family apart, saying my actions were breaking her heart. I didn't respond. I knew it wouldn't make a difference. Her loyalty to Lily was unshakable, no matter how badly I'd been treated. We filed the restraining order. The legal process was draining, but I pushed through, knowing it was necessary. The court date was set, and I tried to focus on getting through it. In the meantime, my cousin Rachel reached out again, letting me know the family had held another meeting, this time without me. The topic of discussion? My unhinged behavior. Rachel, bless her, defended me, pointing out the double standards and the favoritism that had been going on for years. It didn't change much, but knowing someone had spoken up for me made a difference. As the court date approached, Lily's social media posts started losing traction. People seemed to get tired of the constant drama. Some of her followers even began calling her out, saying she was obsessed with dragging me through the mud. The tide was turning, and I felt a small sense of relief. Sophie had an unexpected run-in with my mother at a local grocery store. My mom immediately accused her of poisoning me against the family, saying Sophie was the reason I'd gone no contact. Sophie didn't back down. She calmly stood her ground, making it clear that I'd made my own choices and that she wasn't going to tolerate any more manipulation. The confrontation was tense, but Sophie walked away with her head held high. I couldn't have been prouder. I started receiving private messages from a few family friends who had seen what was happening. They expressed their disappointment in how my family had treated me, sharing stories of their own observations over the years. They confirmed what I'd always suspected. The favoritism towards Lily was obvious to everyone except my parents. In therapy, I had a major breakthrough. I realized I'd spent my whole life trying to earn approval from a family that would never give it to me. For the first time, I felt like I didn't need their validation anymore. I decided to focus entirely on my own healing and building a better future with Sophie. The court hearing was intense. Lily showed up, looking visibly disheveled, and tried to play the victim. She spun a sob story, but the judge wasn't buying it. After reviewing the evidence, the judge granted the restraining order. It was a huge victory, a turning point in my journey towards self-empowerment. As we left the courtroom, I felt lighter, like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. We walked out hand in hand, ready to leave this chapter behind us for good. Walking out of the courtroom after the restraining order was granted felt like stepping into a new world. Lily had shown up looking disheveled, clearly trying to paint herself as the victim, but the judge saw through it. When the ruling was announced, she looked stunned, almost as if she couldn't believe her manipulation hadn't worked this time. There was no victory dance for me, just a mix of relief and sadness. This wasn't how I wanted things to end, but it was necessary for my own peace. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lily went silent on social media. Her usual stream of posts, memes, and vague jabs at me dried up completely. It was eerie, like the calm after a storm. A few days later, Rachel reached out, letting me know that Lily had been avoiding family gatherings and seemed to be spiraling. I felt a small pang of guilt, but quickly reminded myself that her actions had brought us here. This was her mess to deal with. A week later, an anonymous letter arrived in the mail. I opened it, half expecting another rant, but it wasn't what I thought. It was from Lily. The letter was surprisingly genuine, filled with admissions of jealousy and insecurity. She acknowledged the hurt she'd caused and said she was sorry. It took me a while to process it, but in the end, I chose not to respond. I didn't need to reopen old wounds or seek more apologies. Leaving things as they were felt like the best choice. Not long after, my mother tried one final time to pull me back in. She sent a lengthy message pleading for me to attend the next family reunion. She talked about the need for healing, how the family needed unity now more than ever. But reading between the lines, it was clear she was still prioritizing Lily's feelings, just like always. I replied simply, saying I wouldn't be attending and wished her well. Then I blocked her number. There was nothing left to say. Sophie and I finalized our plans and made the big move to a new city. Packing up our apartment felt like shedding an old skin, leaving behind the constant stress and drama. The fresh start was exactly what we needed. We settled into our new place quickly, and I threw myself into work and rediscovered hobbies I hadn't touched in years. I hadn't realized how much of my time and energy had been drained by the family chaos until it was no longer there. As the weeks went by, I started getting messages from a few extended family members who had initially sided with Lily. They apologized, admitting they'd been manipulated by her narrative. It wasn't a flood of support, but it was enough to feel like I wasn't the villain of the story they'd once believed. It was validation I hadn't expected but appreciated. Therapy was a game changer. I had a breakthrough during one session, realizing I'd spent so much of my life chasing after a family that never truly valued me. Letting go of that need for approval lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. I felt like I could finally breathe without the pressure of their expectations crushing me. With the stress gone, I started thriving. Work picked up, and I made new friends. Sophie noticed the change in me almost immediately. We had more good days than bad, and our relationship felt stronger than ever. We found joy in simple things, cooking dinner together, exploring our new city, even starting a few traditions of our own. One night, after a glass of wine and a long conversation, I decided to share my story on Reddit. I didn't hold back. I wrote about the roast, the smear campaign, the restraining order, everything. I was honest about the pain of going no contact and the difficult journey of healing. To my surprise, the post went viral. Thousands of people commented, sharing their own similar stories. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. For the first time, I felt seen by people who understood what I'd been through. Not long after that, Rachel told me that Lily had resigned from her job. It wasn't a big announcement, just a quiet exit that no one in the family really talked about. It seemed like the tide had finally turned. Without her social media antics, the family stopped defending her as fiercely. The silence felt like the first real consequence Lily had ever faced. Out of the blue, I got a message from my father. It was short and sincere. He apologized for not protecting me from the family's toxicity, admitting he'd failed me as a parent. It was the closest thing to an olive branch I'd ever received from him, but I didn't respond. I'd moved on, and reopening that door wasn't something I wanted or needed. Sophie suggested we create our own family traditions, completely separate from the chaos of my past. We booked a quiet weekend getaway in the mountains to celebrate our fresh start. We spent the time hiking, talking, and just enjoying each other's company. It was the most peace I'd felt in a long time. I met up with Rachel before we left. We sat at a coffee shop, reflecting on everything that had happened. She had been my biggest ally through it all, and we talked about how much things had changed. It was a moment of mutual healing, and I realized how grateful I was to have her in my life. When we got back home, I deleted the old family group chat and blocked any lingering contacts that tried to drag me back into the drama. It was time to focus entirely on the future. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't haunted by my family's expectations. I ended my Reddit post with a message to anyone going through similar toxic family dynamics. It's okay to walk away. It's okay to choose your own happiness. It's hard, but it's worth it. Sophie and I have a new city to explore, a supportive group of friends, and a bright future ahead of us. Here's to starting a new chapter, one that I am finally writing for myself.